Okay, so tonight we have the great honor, and it's very exciting to have Pat Wege, who is the Executive Director of the Manitoba Childcare Association. The Manitoba Childcare Association is a nonprofit member-funded, nonpartisan organization, and their mission is to advocate for a quality system of childcare, to advance early childhood education as a profession, and to provide services to their members. The Manitoba Childcare Association has developed a research-based market competitive salary guideline scale for early learning and childcare centers to help the centers establish a balanced fair scale for their employees, and as well to help standardize wages across the province, and also to use as an advocacy tool with government to secure better funding and to help boost wages. So tonight, Pat is going to share with us what is the market competitive salary guideline scale, how it's used, and the current scale for 2016 to 2017. So welcome, Pat. Thank you for being with us tonight. And just so everybody knows, she is calling in from Winnipeg, which is 2 hours ahead of us. And it's great to have you here. So I'll let you take it away.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sean, and to Charlene for that nice intro. I will confess it is a bit after 8 here in Winnipeg on a frosty November evening. I am in my jammies. In the background, I have the Great Canadian Cooking Show on, and so this is a really sweet way to participate in a meeting. I'd like to congratulate everybody from BC. I've been keeping an eye on your $25 a day campaign for a number of years now, and know that everybody's worked really hard at it, and quietly celebrated along with you when you had your election last year, and you had a bit of a flip-flop on your government there for a little bit, but then ended up standing on your feet, and having just had 18 years of a NDP government here in Manitoba, things just seem to go better with some governments rather than others, and it sounds like you've got a good one. It was exciting, Charlene, to hear you talk about your Provincial Childcare Council, and you're at a ministry forum, and you're working on how you can roll out a universal childcare system. So I'm feeling a little jealous because we were there too. About 2 years ago, we had a commitment from our premier to also roll out a universal childcare system, which led to a commission on early learning and childcare. The report is available on our website. You might want to look at it. We had Kathleen Flanagan and Jane Beach develop our roadmap towards universal childcare. However, the whole thing came to a grinding halt in the 2016 election when we changed governments, and so our universal childcare system is put on pause, probably for several terms of a conservative government. So that's our story. But I am here tonight to talk about some work that we've done on market competitive wages, our 10-year quest to help improve compensation in childcare for childcare centers in Manitoba. So Sean did a bit of a rundown about MCCA. Oh, I see somebody corrected my typo there. On my copy of the PowerPoint, it says we were incorporated in 2974, but Sean, if that was you that made that correction, thank you very much. We are not-for-profit registered charity. We are a couple of claim to fames that I like to always mention. We're entirely membership funded through membership dues, our professional development activities, and resource sales. So that makes life a whole lot easier as an organization, not always having to hunt around for the next grant. We have about 4,000 members, mostly those employed in childcare centers, but also licensed family childcare providers, centers, and associates. And Sean had already covered our mission, so I'll skip over that one. We're a small but mighty group. We have about 5 full-time staff, and then also some contract people like our accountant, IT, and desktop publishing. So next slide. So like every other province and territory in Canada, compensation has been a long-standing and sticky problem in Manitoba. Childcare centers were finding that the wages they could afford to pay were not competitive with compensation available in similar markets, specifically through school boards. Couple of problems. Funding of childcare centers in Manitoba is regulated by the government. Maximum parent fees are regulated. There are operating grants that are provided to top up parent fees, but childcare centers can't be raising their rates to cover the cost of higher wages. About 98% of childcare centers in Manitoba are not-for-profit, so that's something else that makes us a little bit distinct from the rest of Canada. So we've got this problem about affordability. We have boards of directors who are unfamiliar with developing wage scales, but are still required to do so as part of their governance role. It's quite a conflict of interest. Parents don't want to pay higher fees for staff wages, and sometimes that's a bit of a problem during the rare times when government allows a parent fee increase that center boards of directors find themselves having to decide if they want to make that change. So just as a matter of interest, a preschool rate here in Manitoba right now is $20.80 a day. It's been that way for about 4 years now, and fees have gone up by $2 a day in the last 15 years. So government keeps a pretty tight handle on those childcare fees, but fortunately, because of the operating grant that they provide, centers from time to time do get a little boost in their revenue. So another problem is that the directors of childcare centers are not required to have management training and may not know how to develop a balanced wage scale. And there was workforce interest in a consistent province-wide salary scale versus the way it is right now, where every individual childcare center develops their own scale. So one of the reasons that we started working on a standardized wage scale was to help government to see the gap between actual wages, what the field was paying, and what a fair wage would be. We were looking for something that we could use as a lobby tool with the workforce, with boards of directors, and with government. And I think most importantly, what sparked our work was to be able to answer the question of how much should an ECE earn. That question was asked of us about 4 years ago on one of our annual treks to meet with the government to plead for more funding. And the minister of the day asked that question, well, how much more do you need in funding and how much should an ECE earn? And it was one of those moments that we all sat there and looked at each other because we didn't have an answer. We knew it was more. ECE should earn more because, you know, we all know they're underpaid. But how much more? And we recognized that we needed to do something. Previous studies and briefs and reports. Yeah. Hello?
Oh, I was just going to say, it sounded like you were cutting out, and I don't know if it was just on my line. That's okay,
Okay.
but it looks
All
good
right.
now, so carry on.
Okay. All right. So, this slide is just some of the evidence that we had been using over time to support compensation as a problem. We had a 1983 report. Government introduced a salary enhancement grant because of that in 1984. In 1987, we had a comparative worse study that recommended a diploma or degree grad should be equivalent to a class 3 teacher clinician at an entry level of 22,000. 1989, we had a task force report that supported the need for an increase in wages. We did a day of demonstration, October 17, 1989, where childcare centers actually closed for the day to support a call for higher funding. That led to a working group on childcare. I'm sure your organizations have also done similar lobby activities to support the demand for higher wages. So those are just some examples of what we did. 1990, we went on with a provincial salary and working conditions report. That time, the average starting for a 2-year diploma was about 16,000 a year. There was a caring for a living study in 1991. The average that time was a little over 18. We did a shoestring budget campaign. So, long list of activities. We first proposed a provincial wage scale back in 1993, and the range at that time was about, in the proposed scale, was about 25 to 29. And then in 1997, we did a salary and benefits survey that showed the average ECE earning was about $10.56 an hour, so about 21,000 a year. So well below the proposed first provincial wage scale that we put out there. So what we decided to do was, we thought if we could lobby for incremental increases, we had some ideas about where the field was. In 1997, we thought if we could start by introducing a salary guideline that was just a bit higher where we knew the field was, we put that out as a challenge to childcare programs. Okay, this is the kind of the provincial average. Phase 1, we called it. It built on the 1997 survey results, and it just suggested that childcare centers try and pay an ECE 2 or 3, which in Manitoba would be a diploma or a degree most often, of between 23 and 26. So that was in 1999. The field was quite receptive to that as a kind of a voluntary target. We did take it to government, told them what we were doing in terms of providing a target to the field. It was a first attempt to try and standardize wages. We continued by releasing a new phase every year, and in the slide that you're seeing now, phase 2 was released in 2000. These were the ranges that we were proposing every year. So you can see they're just a little bit higher each time. Phase 2 is a little higher than phase 1, phase 3 a little higher than phase 2. So every year between 1999 and up until 2007, we provided the sector with a target for them to try and pay their staff voluntarily. By 2007, compensation was really becoming a problem. Government had started to open new funded spaces. The system was expanding. We had a real shortage of ECEs and CCAs, which are childcare assistants. The sector was losing lots of staff to other employers that had comparable jobs and higher wages. So we knew, although the field appreciated the phases that we were putting out, we knew that the actual problem was that it wasn't market competitive, meaning the phase scales that we put out as guidelines were not competitive with other sectors. So we hired an HR firm to research and recommend. Next slide there, Sean. Sean, next slide, thanks. We hired People First HR Services to research and recommend what they called market competitive salary ranges that would enable childcare centers that could afford to pay those rates to be competitive with other employers. So we had, by that time, some research that they could use. We have a resource at MCCA, our Human Resource Management Guide, that has research-based job descriptions for all of the main positions of common in childcare centers. So a director, supervisor, early childhood educator, and the childcare assistants that we had been working on for a number of years. They were based in part on the Childcare Human Resources Sector Council occupational standards. So that's what the HR firm used to establish market competitive salary ranges. As part of their report, what they told us was that they identified that the guideline scales that we had been providing to the field at the phased approach were below market, and that the shortfall was sufficient to be a major contributor to attracting and retaining employees. Can you go to the next slide, Sean? Yeah, thank you. So what they told us was, based on the research, that a market competitive range for an ECE, and that was in 2007, was identified to be $31,200 to $39,000 per year, and that was based on a 40-hour work week. So we put that out to the field again as a target, as a resource. We took it to government, made sure they knew about it. We promoted it to boards of directors to try and get their support to come as close to as possible to paying competitive wages to their staff. But again, it's optional, and the biggest problem is that not all facilities have the funding in order to be able to pay these ranges. Just to give you an idea, I've been focusing mostly on the ECE, but in 2007, these were the recommended ranges for all of the other key positions in a child care center. So you can see that we split director into two different size facilities, one for 50 spaces and one for 51 to 100. We did the same based on the recommendation of the HR firm for the supervisor. And then we have a CCA, childcare assistant, in ECE training. That's kind of a informal definition unique to Manitoba. The government had provided incentives for childcare assistants to be engaged in ECE training, and so we decided to have a recommended salary range category for them that would provide an incentive for them, for the untrained childcare practitioner, to participate in training. So, and then of course the childcare assistant would be somebody probably new to the field who had no formal training and was not enrolled in a part-time ECE training program either. So you can see what the ranges were at that time that were deemed to be market competitive. I'm just going to pause quickly, Sean, and see if anybody has any questions, because this is a lot to digest and it might be confusing. Can we do that?
We certainly can. Did anyone have a question?
Okay, it sounds like we're good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so then going forward, we launched the first market competitive salary guideline scale in 2007. And the slide that you're seeing now shows how it was indexed annually based on a recommendation provided to MCCA by the same HR firm. So 2008-9, we were advised to index it by 3.8%, and at that time we added 2 additional levels of director, levels 3 and 4. That was a request from the field because some of our centers here in Manitoba have grown quite large over time. We've got some facilities that are now licensed for well over 300 spaces, operating out of 3 or 4 locations. So, you know, we have directors who may have multi-million-dollar budgets they're responsible for, several hundred children and 70 or 80 employees. So where we started with director 1 and 2 just didn't cut it over time. So we've had to make a few adjustments to our format as the field has changed. So each year, you know, at about this time, I do contact the HR firm and say, okay, what is your research showing that Manitoba employers are going to be doing to index their wage scales in the not-for-profit sector? And they give me a percentage, and then we do the updating to our scale annually. So just historically, 2009-10 it went up by 4%, 2010-11 went up by 1.5%, and you can see onward each year we do the indexing. In 2014, we did a new market review just to make sure that we were on track. So we checked back in with the HR firm. We provided them with the job descriptions. They did another market review. They did recommend a few adjustments there to keep the scale on track in terms of market competitive. And then you can see the numbers there for 2015, 16, 16 and 17, which takes us now to 2017, 18. So, Sean, do you want to switch the slide? So this is the one that was just indexed in this past month. It's been approved for distribution by our board. It has been provided to the minister because that is what we always do. It's a commitment we made to government that we would provide the scale to them before we give it to our members. So we just did that a couple of weeks ago. So you guys in BC are probably seeing it more than before most MCCA members at this point because we haven't circulated it yet. So you can see on the director page here that we now have, you can see the 4 levels of director according to number of spaces, and that the salary, recommended market competitive salary range for a director starting at about 50 spaces, going right up to 200. So, you know, about 57,924 right up to 101. So that's what the HR firm has told us that a director of a child care center should be earning based on the spaces that you see here. So next slide. Okay, good. So then you can see the supervisor follows more or less the same format. We do have definitions for Supervisor 1 and Supervisor 2, which are also based on number of licensed spaces, but the starting for a Supervisor 1 would be a facility of about 50 spaces, which is our average small center here in Manitoba, at about 46,382, and then ranging up to 64,291 for a Supervisor 2. The ECE, okay, good. The ECE, the range there is about 40,198 up to 50,248. That would be for someone with a diploma, most often, is classified as an ECE here in Manitoba. Some ECEs have degrees. We did not, based on the advice of the HR firm, make a distinction between an ECE with a diploma or a degree, even though they have different classifications. And then the child care assistant, recommended starting for a child care assistant entry level who has no experience, new to the field, would be about $12.63 an hour, ranging up to about $15.78. Can you go to the next slide there, Sean? Yeah, there. And then again, the child care assistant and ECE training is for most often child care assistants who have enrolled in our workplace training program. I don't know if you have anything similar there, but one of the initiatives that Manitoba introduced probably about 10 years ago now was a workplace training option for ECE. It's been hugely popular, and so, as you look at moving towards your universal child care program, you too are going to be needing more ECEs to be working in those new spaces. So you might want to think about a workplace option. So the way that works is that the child care assistant who has been employed in a child care center for a minimum of 2 years can enroll in workplace training. They go to school 2 days a week, and then they stay in their workplace 3 days a week where they're considered to be on their practicum, and the government provides wage replacement for their substitute for when they're in school, so that the child care assistant can continue to earn their full wage while they're in ECE training. And so they go for 2 years and they get their diploma. So that is who falls into our child care assistant in ECE training category. Can you still hear me? I hope so.
Loud and clear.
Okay. So, so that's the market competitive salary guideline scale history in a nutshell. We started off providing some work on scales to help the field be more consistent, to help them identify a wage scale that was balanced, and to use as a lobby tool with government. All these years later, really that hasn't changed. The goals are still the same. We make it available to programs. We continue to encourage government to increase the funding so facilities can afford the market competitive rates. I'm sure you're wondering how successful we've been. Well, I guess like your $25 a day campaign, change takes time. There are facilities that are able to afford the scale and do wait for it to come out every year so that they can make the adjustment to their own employees' compensation, but there's lots that can't afford it. So what we tell facilities to do, they can't afford the most current one, to to use the one that they can afford. We've got 10 of them now. If you can't pay the 2017-18 rates, maybe you can do 2015-16. And so at least that way they're on a pathway. So should that magical moment ever happen where we get that funding increase that we need across the board, that programs will, you know, be on the path towards the most current scale. Here's what we found last year when we did a research project with Probe. We hired a research firm to do a number of surveys for us. We did a survey of the Manitoba public, one of Manitoba parents, MCCA members, and Manitoba business leaders on the topic of childcare. So one of the questions was for the practitioner what their wages actually are. So what we found in 2016, the average director was earning $30.69 an hour, which is about the equivalent of Director 1 level 2 to 3, so quite far behind. The supervisor, the average hourly was about $22.03, which is the equivalent to Supervisor 1 level 1. The ECE, the average hourly was $18.38, which was 95 cents per hour below level 1. And the childcare assistant, the average hourly being $12.93, which is about level 1 to 2. So out of all those levels, the only job that came pretty close to being market competitive was the childcare assistant. And most practitioners are at the very bottom of or even below the most current market competitive scale. So Manitoba's got a long way to go before we can say that our practitioners, our people who provide early learning and childcare, are earning market competitive wages. Some other interesting findings from our survey that I thought you might want to hear about were the top reasons why ECEs and CCAs left their past employment was actually not compensation. That was number 3. They left because of poor management. And so that certainly gave us some pause when we saw that. 39% left because they felt undervalued, and number 3 was compensation and benefits. And the top reasons for choosing their current employment, so if they had left somewhere and gone somewhere else, what was their top reasons for choosing where they went? Well, number 1 was convenience. That was a surprise for us. Number 2 was opportunities for advancement, and number 3 was reputation. So, next slide. Sean, next slide, thanks. The other question we asked was about retention, because that's also a problem in our field. You know, if wages are not competitive and people who have an ECE credential are employable in other sectors, you know, we wanted to know how they felt about their current employment and what their long-range plans were. 82% of people told us that overall they were satisfied in their jobs, and 75% expected to still be working in childcare in 3 years. 16% were unsure, and 9% said nope, they didn't expect to be working in childcare in the next 3 years. So, you know, this too was a bit of a surprise, because we thought retention was a bit more of a problem than what our survey results showed it to be. So when we asked those who said no, they didn't think they'd be working in childcare, what do you think you're going to be doing? 22% thought they'd be working in an unrelated field or retired, or working in the school system, going back to school, staying home with their own children, and 25% were unsure. So that's kind of the end of the slides. you know, like I had said, we still have a long way to go. We're pretty much like the rest of Canada when it comes to compensation being a problem. We do know that the field do appreciate having a resource that they can look at least a target to try and introduce a province-wide scale. But for now, we're going to have to continue the advocacy efforts with the province to try and get funding increases to support better wages. So that's it. I don't know if anybody has any questions or...
I have a question. This is Friday. Hello.
Hi.
I want to thank you so much for connecting with us. It's really great to see this research, and I really appreciate having this alliance with Manitoba Childcare Association, so thank you, first off. And I'm curious if you have sort of unilateral support within your sector there, or when you put out these things, these reports, do you get pushback from some childcare operators saying, this is unrealistic and we can't do it, and there's, is there resistance or fear, or you feel like overall you guys are all kind of on the same page, or, how does that look for you?
Well, that's a very good question, Friday, and you did hit the nail on the head. And so, yes, we do put it out there, and there are programs, directors, people who work in centers that say, well, this is all well and good, but my center can't afford to pay that anyway, so what's the point? But going back to what I said before, because we have 10 years worth of these now, every center can afford to be using one of them. It might not be the most current, but they still have the option of picking one. You can't use 2017-18. You can use 2015-2016 or 2014-2013 if things are that bad. So, that's what we say back to them, that if we as a province have a goal to standardize wages among facilities, then centers can be helping by adopting the scale that is most affordable to them.
Okay, thank you.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it does. I appreciate that you seem to put it on a level of, we're all in this together and we're all at different levels maybe within it, but we're all on the same plan, even if we're at different steps in the staircase, so to speak, that it's, I appreciate your perspective and your wording there. Thank you.
Yeah. So, I mean, we do remind employers that those facilities who pay the best wages get the best staff oftentimes, right? That if you want to be an employer of choice, then you're going to have to pay the best that you can, because we've told the ECEs in Manitoba what they're worth. They know what to look for, and there are centers that pay it. So, oftentimes that is a very valuable resource for ECEs who are out there job hunting, to be able to ask in an interview, what market competitive salary guideline scale the center is on. So there's three-way pressure for that arises. There's pressure on the employer to pay the best they can. There's pressure on the board because they ultimately set the wages, at least here in Manitoba. There's pressure on government because we're able to say to them, this is what an ECE should be earning, and this is what they are earning, and here's the big gap. So, it's a great lobby tool without being what's the word I'm looking for? It's a light kind of stick instead of a heavy one.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, and I think all children, deserve to have educators who are working with them, who are fairly compensated and happy and satisfied in their job.
Well, I mean, absolutely. I think we all agree that from coast to coast, every time I get together with national colleagues, the plight of the childcare workforce and low compensation, and what are we going to do, and how is everybody handling it? It's always a topic. It's a topic in every province and territory right across Canada. So I know PEI has also done some work on putting out guideline scales, and I think Quebec has one as well that was introduced by their government a number of years ago. So, I think the more we can all be heading in the same direction, not just individually in our provinces, but all together, as a nation, the better off we're ultimately going to be.
And there's stronger power in that.
Yeah, we're way too isolated from each other, that we've got so many issues in common, and every province, Charlene, when we were in Ottawa, we heard how every province has a different priority, eh? BC's is $25
right.
a day, Alberta's working on something else. I don't really know what Saskatchewan's doing, but Ontario's got their commitment to open 100,000 new spaces over the next 5 years, and so that most provinces have a priority, but they're all different from one another.
Pat,
And they're all important, right?
Yeah, I have a question, Pat. So your spaces, the fees that are charged for your spaces are set by government, is that true?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so if everyone charges the same fee, that means their income is the same, correct?
That is true.
Per space? So
yes.
how does the wage grid, the tool that you've put out, which I think is amazing, it must have been so much work, how does one employer say, we have the same income as you, but we're paying this? Another employer says with the same amount of spaces, with the same income, we'll pay something different.
Yeah, very good question. So what often is cited as the number one factor is rent. Some childcare centers are co-located in a school and pay very little rent, and others are located in commercial spaces and are paying rent that is through the roof. So that is often the number one factor is rent, because you're absolutely right. The ratio is 1 to 4 for an infant, 1 to 8 for a preschooler, 1 to 15 for a school ager. So staff costs between facilities are all pretty much the same, right? Because each group of 4 infants needs an ECE. Each group of 8 preschoolers needs an ECE. But it's the expenses that go along with that are not
Does where they live make a difference?
Absolutely. The childcare in the north, in northern Manitoba, we have some small towns that are very isolated. Everything has to be shipped by air or winter road, so location makes a difference. But often it's those costs related to office and building. We have quite a number of standalone programs where they're purpose-built, which is great to have a purpose-built childcare program, but then that particular facility is responsible for maintenance, for repairs, whereas the one that's co-located in a school, about half of the childcare centers in Manitoba are now co-located either in a school or on school property that they've gotten permission from the school to build on school property. But even amongst school divisions, what they charge to the facility for being in or on school property varies from school division to school division. And some see childcare as being a cash cow, right? They'll see them not as a partner in early learning, but as a source of additional revenue for the school division. And the province the licensing authority plays absolutely no role in helping school divisions to try and understand that, facilities don't have a lot of money to be helping to offset the cost of the refurbishing the new gym or something in the school.
Pat, I'm wondering about.
Very interesting.
Pardon me?
I'm wondering about unionized programs.
Yeah,
how that affects the wages.
Yeah, there aren't that many unionized programs in Manitoba. There's probably less than 20 childcare centers that are unionized.
Okay.
A couple under QP and a couple under MGEU, and I think there might be a couple in the north who are unionized under food and commercial workers or something odd like that. But the interesting thing is both QP and MGEU wait for our guideline scales to come out every fall. So the unions are using our work as their benchmark. But again, regardless of a collective agreement, childcare center can only pay what it can afford. And if the scale is not affordable to a facility, there's nothing they can do. They can't raise parent fees, and they have to wait for government to agree to provide an increase. So
okay, yeah.
So the unions really haven't been able to make any more headway than the non-unionized programs.
I'm in a union and my wages suck.
Yeah. So I don't have, if I had a solution to compensation problem for the workforce, we would have introduced it by now. It's a tough one. Somebody's got to pay more, and even in Manitoba, where I had said to you, 98% are not for profit. So we're not dealing with an owner operator where fees tend to be, or where wages tend to be a little lower. I have heard. We're not for profit sector primarily, and compensation is still a problem. Somebody's got to pay more. Either it's the parent or it's the public, but it's hard to squeeze more money out of both.
It really is.
So do you have a real crisis in space in Manitoba for
yes,
or
yes.
do you feel that there's sufficient?
No, we actually, we just came, like I said to you, we came out of 18 years of an NDP government, and we're able to make a lot of headway in terms of, initiatives that have been wonderful. And so, as you work on your universal program, you may want to consider some of them. So one thing that the province introduced under the NDP government probably 10 or 15 years ago was an online registry where parents can go and register their need for a licensed childcare space. So what that provides to us is an idea about how many more spaces that need to be licensed. So the last stats on that were about 16,500 kids waiting for a licensed childcare space here in Manitoba. So those stats are updated regularly by the province. So we do watch them really closely, and they've doubled over the past 5 years alone. So, I don't know if you have anything similar, but as you work towards, I don't know what your definition of universal is going to be. If universal is a space for every preschool child in BC, or if universal is going to be universally available for every parent that chooses to use it. The definition that you choose for universal will tell you how many more spaces you need to be opening.
Yeah, and that's sort of where we're at right now. That's the work that's being done this week, or today and tomorrow and beyond, is deciding what does that mean.
Right.
One thing that we're all clear on, and I'm wondering about you, Pat, we're not advocating for universal curriculum.
Well, Manitoba introduced
definitely
Manitoba introduced a provincial curriculum quite a number of years ago. The province put out guidelines, but each child care facility had to come up with their own curriculum framework based on the provincial guidelines. So there is a lot of flexibility in the curriculum, and there's a real strong support for play-based early learning programs. So, I think we've got a fairly strong curriculum. But
we have an early learning framework, but there's no accountability to say you're going to follow it, and it's a framework, right, that allows for a number of different pedagogical approaches.
Right. Ours would be the same. So, I think that's very different than the public school system where there's a provincial curriculum, and it's expected that that's the one that teachers are going to be using in the classroom. I personally think that, we've got about 550 childcare centers here in Manitoba, and I think the province could be provide more support for preschool curriculums. It just seemed a little disjointed to expect each of the 550 childcare centers to develop their own curriculum, and yet all of Manitoba's 800 public schools have a provincial curriculum. That's just me, though. One of the things that we really struggle with is just shortage of ECEs, and I suspect that that's going to be a problem for you as well. So, I had mentioned the workplace training program as hugely popular. There's been hundreds of students put through that ECE workplace program. The 2-year full-day program is still around. There's tuition support that the province introduced, so the province will cover the tuition for the second year of the ECE program. They also introduced a recruit back fund, so somebody who had been out of ECE for, I think it's 5 years, something like that, and came back, somebody with a diploma or a degree could come back, work for 2 years and get a $3,000 bonus or something for so they've been able to recruit back some of the people that had left because of compensation. But the bottom line is, until they sew up the hole at the bottom, you can train as many more ECEs as you want, but the education system continues to hire them hand over fist for early learning programs that we're introducing, and childcare just can't compete with the education system.
Yeah, we're definitely losing ECEs to other workplaces that are paying better, And we get, I get emails quite frequently of, members, wondering how they can attract staff and where are the early childhood educators, and they just can't find the people they need to staff their programs.
Yeah. Well, I did put a couple of bits of information from our workforce survey in, because I think we sometimes get fixated on talking about wages when it's not always about wages. Going back to 43% of people said that they left their last job because of poor management. So I don't know what kind of management training you guys have in BC, but we have none. That's a requirement. You have to be an ECE 3, but you can get an ECE 3 with a post-diploma program in infant care. So there's no requirement for a management credential. So we've got a fair number, I'm guessing, of directors out there who mean well, but are really struggling in terms of human resource management. So what we did was a couple of years ago, we with the same HR firm that we've worked with on all of our projects, we have a deal with them now. They offer on a subscription service something that's called HR at your service. So for childcare centers that are MCCA members, for $60 a month, they can get HR on call through our HR firm, unlimited, by telephone or by email. So if you've got a problem, you know, a director has an issue, absenteeism, or performance, you know, anything related to HR that they need some advice on, they can call the HR firm and get some help with that. So, you know, we're trying to figure out what our field needs, what needs they have that are in common, and access to HR resource and support is definitely one of them. So, you know, if we can strengthen the skills of our directors, you know, it may help with the retention. It's not wages, but again, you know, wages is not number one, at least in our surveys. It's important, but it's not everything. So what are the other things that we need to be addressing in terms of recruitment and retention? We also do annually a directors conference. We introduced that probably 10 years ago. We do that annually. We take it around the province, and it's an opportunity for directors to come together with their peers and, you know, participate in 2 days of intense PD on a topic, and that's been really popular as well. And then we do something else called lunch and learns, where they're short topics. You know, we'll invite a presenter in for a 30-40 minute presentation. We combine it with a lunch at a location somewhere, and we'll get 70 or 80 directors coming to those 2 or 3 times a year. So, you know, we're really trying to support and shore up the skills of directors as a recruitment and retention strategy.
And that makes a lot of sense. You know, I think it is a bit of, you know, can be a bit of an issue with the management skills. And I mean, because I mean, I know when I did my ECE that there really wasn't anything like that involved in the curriculum, right?
No, that's right. And I think I'd said to you that we're finding some of the centers now, they're huge. You know, I'll talk to directors who have 70 staff. Like, imagine that. Like,
that's incredible.
In the business world, if you have 70 employees, you have an HR department.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, it makes sense.
Our field is not funded to have an HR department. So we have directors who are expected to know everything about everything, from construction to engineering to project design to curriculum development to HR to tech, you know, IT, and you know, these poor people are often ECEs with diplomas, and we're starting to talk a lot about scope of practice. Like, what is the scope of practice of an ECE that's reasonable? Because there doesn't seem to be an ending. You know, for the low wage, ECs are expected to know everything about everything and do everything, right? From being the early childhood educator, the teacher, the caregiver, the janitor. You know, before you go home at the end of the day, you have to mop the floors. Like, we got a lot of work to do in our field. Yeah, no kidding, eh? Snack maker,
artist,
musician.
So,
So, all of the surveys that we did, in particular our membership one, they are on our website. You might want to take a look at it. I don't imagine it would be all that much different if you did similar work in BC. It's really helpful to know what people are thinking. I don't know what about you guys, but I find there's some commonalities for ECEs here that we almost have a mantra, that, oh, well, nobody appreciates the work that we do, and we're undervalued. And what we found in our surveys was that's not true at all, that the ones who undervalue ECEs the most are ECEs. That from our public survey and our parent survey, the work of the early childhood educator was highly respected by them. But yet when you ask the ECE, that's where, you start to see problems in how they perceive themselves and how they perceive their own worth and their own work. So, we could be doing more, I think, to, some of those myth busters. Not all ECEs in Manitoba are poorly paid. That we do have some that are fairly paid in programs that can afford to pay better. They do, and we've got some people who do make a decent wage, but we don't talk about them. And the other thing that we try not to do so much here in Manitoba anymore is drag ECE wages through the media, because that doesn't help anybody feel good about themselves. One of the reasons people may be leaving the field in droves is because we keep talking about how poorly paid the sector is. So now everybody knows that. And over my time at MCC, I've got calls from parents who said, my daughter's thinking of going to ECE, but I've heard the wages are really bad, and I'm really worried about that. And is it really as bad as they say? And so, sometimes we do things that shoot ourselves in the foot unintentionally.
Well, and that just reminds me of a story of one of my neighbors in my building, a young woman in her sort of mid-20s, and when she found out I worked, as an ECE, and we were talking about it, and she said that when she graduated from high school, that was what she wanted to do, was become an ECE. And so many people talked her out of it. You're not going to make any money, and this and that. Yeah. And I thought, wow, we really lost someone fabulous to the field.
Yeah, absolutely.
She was fear-monged, right?
Yeah. So, I think there's some things it would be nice if we did as committed to do as a sector. And I think one of them could be talking better about the work of ECEs and the opportunities that exist, because there are lots of them. They may not always be directly working in child care centers, but, I think we all agree that, in particular school divisions, it is what it is. Have jobs for ECEs and lots of jobs, and they do pay better. So, you might really not. Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to say, and empowering the ECE to realize and accept and own how valuable they are and the work that they do.
That's
how
right.
valuable it is, and to start. And if you start feeling better about yourself and more empowered, it's going to be a stronger voice out there that, we deserve to be compensated better, right?
Like, yeah, absolutely.
It all kind of goes hand in hand.
Yeah, so I think we can all vow to talk better about it. I know I do a lot of student presentations, and I'm kind of at the end of my career now, but I have not any regrets about childcare. I've met wonderful people. you know, it's, you know, I try and tell the students about, you know, when you're working in childcare, you belong, you know, you belong, you're doing important work. Not everybody can say that they, you know, they get up in the morning and they're going to do important work, and you will meet wonderful people, and you know, there's a lot of cohesion in our field that I don't think exists in other workplaces. And I think we need to identify those strengths that we have and really build up on them because, you know, again, money isn't everything. And it's us that has made it the number one thing that we always focus in on. So
there are some remarkable things about working in the sector, definitely.
mm-hmm. So any other questions? No?
Well, it's a pretty quiet crew out there tonight.
I could ask you questions till the cows come home, Pat. Believe me, 'cause these are the conversations that we're having right at this very moment with the same kind of interesting things happening.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Well, I mean, you could either ask now, I'm not going anywhere, or you could call me. You know
yeah, I probably will email. But just the one thing I did want to ask. So the government has no say whatsoever in what the ECE is paid. They just govern what the fees are.
So here's the thing. So the government sets the parent fees. They provide an operating grant to top up fees. Just to give you a sense of operating grant, like the preschool grant, the infant grant is about $11,000 a year per infant. So the grants are quite high compared to other provinces, I've heard. So the centers that get a government grant, and most of them do because all the not-for-profits are eligible, have to submit their budgets to the licensing authority annually. So I have heard that sometimes if the licensing authority believes the center might be paying more than the average of all the other child care centers, that they may question that. Even though the center board has passed the budget with the wages, the licensing authority may question wages scales that they feel are a little too high.
So, and meaning that they don't necessarily need all the money that they're getting. They're using it for wages as opposed to operating.
Yeah, no, not that they don't need it. Just that the licensing authority may question. I don't think that they make anybody roll back, but that they do keep an eye on facilities that they think might be paying more than they should.
Right. Well, very interesting conversations, Pat, and very timely for us here in BC. I know every province is going to be different, but I think there's lessons to be learned from. We have like you said, so many commonalities.
Yeah.
That it's really important that we communicate with each other, province to province, and you know, not to copy any other province, but there's lots of lessons to be learned and great ideas. And I know I'll be taking some of this stuff I've been writing, Natalie, as you were talking, to the Provincial Child Care Council in terms of suggestions and things like that. So thank you so very, very much.
Well, you're welcome. I mean, you know, again, there's some great initiatives that Manitoba has introduced to increase the supply of ECEs that I think BC could look at. I know PEI has gone ahead and done some of the same. So, you know, there are initiatives in every province that seem to stand out as being good ones to be using in others. So, you know, I could, you know, call me and we can talk a little bit more about that. But also do take a look at the commission report that
For sure.
Flanagan and Beach did for Manitoba, because there are some very good ideas in there about rolling out a universal system. There are some that I don't like, so it's not like a a done deal, but most of it's pretty solid.
Yeah, like someone said today in our presentation, if we wait till it's perfect, we're not going to get anywhere. We have to start somewhere and work out the kinks. Easy or nothing if not flexible.
Yeah, that's right. But that's why I think, part of your work that would make sense to me is to do some digging in each province to find out what the highlights are, what's worked really well for you guys.
Oh yeah, we've done that. Yeah, that's I agree with you, Pat. That's really important for sure.
Yes. So did the workplace program get onto your radar?
We actually are talking about that in different context about practicums, and that's what we call it. They come for practicums, but I know that's part of the bigger conversation for sure.
Yeah.
It was mentioned actually today. So.
Yeah. Well, it's exciting times, eh? There's lots of good things happening in many provinces.
It really is.
Yeah, we call it a flurry today. It's a flurry.
A flurry? Well, hey, when it happens, run with it, because we had 18 years of flurry, and now we're down to like nothing. We're like standing still.
It'll come back.
Okay, any last questions or thoughts, anyone out there? No? Well, thanks so much, Pat. I learned so much tonight, and
okay.
I'm going to listen to it again, and I've got some things I want to write down myself and focus in on my work. And thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. It's been really great. We appreciate you sharing your
thank you so much,
your research and knowledge.
You're welcome. And so this is my favorite topic. So if anybody has any questions, just call me. 204-336-5060 is my direct line, or you can send me an email to MCCA. It's Pat Wege, WEGE, at mccahouse.org. So happy to talk to anybody.
Excellent. Thank you. I know I'll be.
And I hear, Pat, that you're retiring.
I am. Yes. It's bittersweet.
For whatever that means in our field.
I know. People keep saying that. Oh, yeah, you'll reincarnate as something else. We'll see.
Okay.
Congratulations on your retirement, and
thank you
so much for your leadership across the country.
Thank you. Well, and good luck to all of you in BC. I'll be watching.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thanks, everyone.